Hello, I'm Andy O'Sullivan from the Academy of Public Speakers. Recently, I had the chance to chat over coffee with the 2014 World Champion of Public Speaking, Dananjaya Hettiarachichi. As we chatted, Dananjaya shared some amazing content with me that I knew you'd want to hear. We talked about how to use props in a presentation and the only type of props to use, how to structure a world-class speech, and Dananjaya even shared with me his tips on becoming a world-class speaker. If you're still to have the pleasure of meeting Dananjaya, let me tell you a little bit about his background. To achieve the title of World Champion of Public Speaking, Dananjaya had triumphed over 33,000 contestants from 120 countries. He became the first and still is the only Asian to ever win the title in the contest's 75-year history. Dananjaya's winning speech, I See Something in You, was rated amongst the most talked about speeches of 2014 by Fortune magazine. As a specialist in human resource development and the CEO of Standard & Stellar Consulting, Dananjaya has a comprehensive understanding of adult learning and skill building. Join Dananjaya and I now as we chat over coffee. Had you taken part in the contest before?
I have. In fact, I've been competing since 2006. It's been almost a 10-year journey. And it's been a journey that's taught me many things.
For 10 years you've been competing?
That's right.
So you obviously learned a lot during those 10 years.
Absolutely. I mean, everything that can happen to a speaker has happened to me on stage. So really nothing can surprise me anymore.
So what kind of experience have you learned?
There are a lot of experiences, but I think one of the most important things that I've learned is that you got to finish the job. Mm-hmm. When you get on stage, a lot of things can happen. Your mic can fail, you can forget your speech, the audience may not react the way you want them to, but a good speaker is a strong speaker, and a strong speaker always finishes what he set out to do, whatever the circumstances. When you got on stage, you got to finish your speech.
So no matter what situations happen, you've always got that confidence to carry on, see it right through to the end.
Absolutely, because good speakers find a way to make it work.
Going back to your winning speech, how long did you work on that? I'm sure it's not something you came up with overnight.
The first version of that speech was done in 2012 for a TEDx speech in Colombo. Now, the original version of this was 20 minutes. And I was working on the speech for over 2 years to bring that 20 minutes down to 7.5 or in between 7.5 minutes. So this is not a speech that I did 6 months ago or 4 months ago. It's been a work in progress that I've been doing for over 2 years.
2 years to create
right.
A 7-minute speech. That's obviously takes a lot of tweaking, adjusting. And presumably, every time you give the speech, you change it, you maybe add something in, tweak it, depending on reaction.
The secret is in what I like to call as the economy of words. I think when you look at each sentence, a speaker must try to find the optimum combination of words without losing the impact. So not only do you have to make sentences shorter, but you can rearrange the words in a sentence to create different impact. So for me, when I started tweaking this, I was taking each sentence and trying to make it shorter, rearranging the words in the sentence in a way that I don't lose that original impact, but make it more impactful and more punchier or more sharper than what it was before. So a lot of tweaking, and tweaking is all about just finding that optimum words and the combination of those words in a speech.
So every time you give a speech, you then analyse and look at how it's been received and how you can improve each time.
Absolutely. It's something that I used to do when I was competing. For 10 years, initially when I started competing, I didn't like feedback. My character, my personality wasn't developed enough to receive feedback. Because when you start speaking, you have a sense of pride that you're always correct. And something that I learned through my journey is that you got to be humble enough to receive feedback. And the feedback you get is different. Some people might be talking utter rubbish, but some people actually make sense. So as a speaker, it's your duty to take the feedback that's meaningful to you and start making those changes. But then to do this, you got to evolve as a leader at the same time, because you got to be humble enough to open yourself up to people and ask for feedback. and take that feedback seriously and focus on the little changes that will give you big impact. So at the start, no, I wasn't very much into taking feedback, but I knew later on if I was to win this contest, I needed to get feedback. And that's when I started evolving as a person, as a leader, and as a speaker to actually incorporate feedback into my speeches.
One of the things with feedback, you can often find that somebody might say, talk louder at that point, and somebody else might say, no, talk quieter. So how do you balance the two different views you can sometimes get on the same speech to create the impact you want?
It's very important to first understand your natural rhythm and your natural style of speaking. For me, I was always uncomfortable with trying things that made me feel uncomfortable on stage. So once you identify your rhythm and your style, you need to take the feedback that you can confidently incorporate at that level. Now, your style can evolve, that can happen. But my advice for speakers who are starting out is find your natural style and rhythm and incorporate feedback that you're comfortable with associating or incorporating into your speech, because it doesn't make sense. If someone is giving you feedback and if that feedback is making you uncomfortable on stage, or you're trying to do something which is out of your natural style, you will look awkward because you feel awkward.
Sure.
So it's very important to find your style and take the feedback that is in line with your style.
And then do you get extra feedback by maybe recording your speeches by audio or video? So then
Absolutely. It's something that I did later on in my speaking career, where I asked a friend of mine or a club member of mine to record my speeches and send it to me, and then I take a look at it and I realize a lot of mistakes that I make on stage, and I used to make a conscious effort to adjust and correct that. Yeah.
So this is something you do regularly now, always record
now
speeches?
Or before?
Well, so before you wouldn't do when you first started?
When I started, no, but when I was getting closer, but the last 4 to 5 years is something that I did before I won the contest. It's something that I did, yeah.
Did you look at the speech yourself? Do you then look at maybe how you move?
Of course, like I have a way of analyzing my own speeches, and basically I follow the judging criteria. And then I also look at what other speakers that I like and speakers who have a similar style or a style that I appreciate. How do they do it? And I do this evaluation in 2 ways. A, I look at the guideline. And number 2, I look at speakers that I admire and see, okay, how would they have done this differently? And then I make sure that I do the same, do that the way that the correct way actually.
And that would be both the way you're speaking and the way you're moving?
Absolutely, because speaking has structure and delivery. What you say and how you say it is very important. When you say it and where you say it is also important. So when you're assessing a speech, not only do you have to look at structure, you got to also look at the delivery aspect of it. And that's the 2 ways that you evaluate a speech.
And talking of structure, do you have a particular way you like to structure your speeches?
Well, there is no particular style. I like exploring different styles of structuring speeches. In my video YouTube series that I do a session on speech structuring and storytelling, and I explore different styles of storytelling and speech structuring depending on the type of audience. Now, sometimes if it's a more younger audience, you have to be a little bit more direct, has to be more dynamic, has to be more impactful. If it's a more mature senior audience, I like to take a more experienced approach to it, a more logical approach to it. It really depends on the audience that you're speaking to.
And what about if it was, say, a business audience?
A business audience, when you talk to a business audience, how you structure your speech depends on the level of credibility you have. So if you have a lot of credibility, now for example, if you are a domain expert, let's say you're talking to a group of managers on business strategy, and you yourself is an expert on business strategy, then you have this comfort and confidence to experiment. You can give your opinion freely because you're an authority in that area. But if you're not, then it's very important to adopt a logical, evidence-based approach to present your speech. Now, that's how I would approach a business audience. It depends on how credible you are in that circle. For example, if Steve Jobs comes and says, the next innovation in IT is going to be ABC, no one's going to doubt him because he's got credibility.
Sure.
But if you and I go up to them and say, this is going to be the next innovation, they're going to look at, okay, how could you say that? So that's why if you don't have enough credibility, have the evidence and the logic to back your conclusion up. And that's how you should approach a business audience.
So would you start your speech by gradually introducing it, then bringing in the evidence?
Absolutely. That's how I would structure it. I would make my point and then support that point with the evidence that I have. It can be from research, it can be an anecdote, it can be from interviews, whatever it is, yeah.
And what way do you think we can open a speech? So often you hear people come on stage, they kind of waffle around a bit, we don't know what they're even going to talk about. Can you suggest some good ways we can open speeches to kind of have impact and get the audience's focus?
Well, from a traditional way of speech structuring, the question that we need to ask is more than how, is what's the impact we want to create. And any opening that can grab the attention of the audience is a good enough opening. Now, how do you do that? It can be a story, it can be an anecdote, it can be a quotation, it can be a statistic. The method of opening is less important than the impact that you want to create. So the ideal way is that you got to grab the attention of the audience and you got to figure out a way on how to do it. Different speakers set up different styles. And it's important to find a mechanism that's comfortable for you, but it has to be something that grabs the attention of the audience.
So if we want to grab the audience's attention, I'm assuming we need to know a bit about our audience in advance.
Yeah.
And research them so we know who it is we're talking to. So we can then create something that we know is going to be really appropriate to them.
Absolutely. That's something that every speaker has to do, just getting the homework all sorted out. I've seen so many speakers that do try different things. Some people try magic tricks on stage. Some people play a video. Some people appear on stage wearing a costume. It really depends on your audience, as you said. But the trick is, you got to grab that attention in the opening.
We touched on earlier a bit about the stagecraft. Do you have any thoughts on how to effectively use the stage or the speaking area so we can, again, reinforce our message?
Well, when you talk about stagecraft, once again, it's very important to understand where you're speaking and your audience demographic. Stagecraft means the effective utilization of the stage to enhance your delivery. Now, there are different techniques. You can position elements of your speech on a timeline on stage. That is one way you can use the stage. When you're telling a story, you can position different characters on different parts of the stage. That's another way. You can use your stage for demonstrations, where you call participants on stage and you use different parts of that stage. So using a stage is important, but then once again it has to enhance the delivery of your speech. There are ways you can use the space that will detract the value that you have to present to the audience, which is something that you shouldn't do. But any movement on stage that you make, once again, the principle is it has to be purposeful. If you use the stage purposefully, it enhances your delivery. If you can't use the stage purposefully, then stand in one place and deliver your speech.
In what ways have you seen it distract from it?
I have seen a lot of speakers just pace up and down the stage. Just walk up and down. And that's not stagecraft.
I used to do that. Like a caged animal, just pacing up and down.
Yeah, and it detracts you from the whole thing.
Yeah.
I've seen some people use the stage, for example, they're talking about a critical element, and just when they're about to deliver that punchline, they start moving. And once again, you lose that effectiveness of that content.
Yeah.
So it's very important that whatever movement you do, it just should add to the speech and not take away from it.
If you're doing a rehearsal of your speech, would you practice the movement at the same time?
Absolutely. When it comes to the rehearsal part, you've got to make sure that everything that you do is just as you have practiced. Because when you look at the preparation of a good speech, there are 3 stages. The first one is preparation, second one is practice, third one is rehearsal. Now, preparation is where you assemble your content very loosely. Practicing is where you start tightening the screws and making it more solid. Rehearsal is where you practice it exactly the way you want to deliver. So when you're at the rehearsal stage, yes, you gotta move exactly the way you want to move in that final act or final event.
And do you rehearse in front of people or just on your own in front of the mirror?
Ideally, you should always rehearse. Once again, rehearsal has to be in front of people. Preparation and practice can be on your own. But rehearsal time, you gotta have an audience.
And is it worth recording those rehearsals?
Yes, it's very important.
So you review those again to each time to see how you can keep changing it.
And especially if you're in the business of paid speaking. When people pay you money to speak, you gotta make sure that what you are delivering is worthy of the money. So recording your speech and trying to figure out those small changes that'll give you big impact will add value to your audience who are paying to come and listen to you.
And we talked earlier about how to start a speech. What about when it comes to wrapping up the speech and closing the speech? Have you thoughts on that you can share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you wanna end a speech, now the opening has to be something that grabs attention. When you want to end a speech, the speech ending has to be something that the audience will remember. So we always say you got to have a memorable ending. Now, once again, the ways in which you can end a speech is countless. You can end it very simply with a story. You can end it with a quotation. You can even end it asking an audience a question. But it has to be memorable. So once again, the mechanism is less important than the impact. So you have to find a way that the audience will remember your ending. It's a principle of recency, where people will remember the last thing you do first. So it's always important to have a good ending that's memorable. Now, what can you do to make it memorable? Depends on what you're talking about and who the audience is.
Yeah, sure. I know in some of your speeches you ask a lot of rhetorical questions or you get audience engagement.
Yeah.
Is that a key point to all speeches, do you feel, to get that level?
Well, it's something that is used in many good speeches, and it's a speaking style that I like because it engages the audience. Some speakers don't like to ask rhetorical questions. It's very difficult to argue it from a point of whether it's right or wrong, but it's the preference of style. For me, I like being a conversational speaker. And that's why my speech in the World Championship, when I wanted to win it, I said I want to win it in my own terms, on my own terms. And what are those terms? I wanted to bring back speaking to speaking and to a style that is conversational. So for me, asking questions from the audience and engaging the audience is something that I feel very comfortable doing because it's my style. But sometimes it may not be something that you are comfortable with. So it all depends on what kind of a style you like to adopt.
So would you ask just rhetorical, or do you actually ask questions, stand and wait for answers, feedback?
A rhetorical question is always a question you ask, but don't expect someone to give you an answer. So that's why we call it a rhetorical question. So it's always important that you don't wait too long for someone to answer the question. So you ask the question, and you ask a question to trigger thought, not necessarily to answer.
But I guess if somebody does answer you, then that's fine.
That's fine. Yeah, that's managing your audience.
Sure. And then your winning speech, you have the rose, you have the bucket, and you effectively use that. Are using props of any form in speeches a good idea? Do they help?
It's a very good idea. It's a very good idea because you go from showing something, you go from telling something to showing something. And whenever there is a transition between telling and showing, and a transition from showing and telling, it increases the engagement of the audience with you. So it's a very good technique. Rather than using just words, using something that you can show increases that engagement with the audience.
So props can truly be of anything we can use as a prop to get that engagement.
It's important to pick a prop that enhances your speech. You need to pick a prop that is in line with what you're trying to say. And your prop should add value to what you're saying. So it's no point having a prop that repeats what you're saying.
Oh, that's a key difference, isn't it? Yeah.
It is a very key difference.
Yeah.
So For example, it doesn't make sense for you to have a rose and you're talking about roses. But if you use a rose as an analogy for something bigger, now it makes sense because you're using the rose to help the audience visualize a different picture. So when you're picking a prop, the question you need to ask is it adding on to my speech?
Because I think so often the better thing to do is stick with that, is bring a rose, because we're talking about a rose to show.
Yeah, which doesn't add value.
No, it is. It just repeats. And I see exactly what you're saying.
Absolutely.
It's just repeating. And that is the thing I've done, and I think people often do, is just bring a demonstration of the same thing. But
Which doesn't add value.
No, it is. I like that. To just use something to create the analogy and bring
correct.
forward. Very powerful. Since you've won the championship, obviously you're now speaking internationally. You're speaking in front of audiences you don't know. Do you find that there's a challenge in yourself there? Because obviously a lot of people get nerves when they're speaking in public, be it a small audience and obviously you're doing very large audiences now. You're not doing 10s, you're doing 100 all the time. Is there a full process you go through to prepare before you're going to be going up on stage in front of large audiences?
After you become a world champion, if you're a real world champion, nervousness is something that you, at this stage, should have learned to control. A lot of people ask me that question, and I say it's like asking whether Michael Schumacher is nervous driving a Formula One car. At that level, you can't be nervous. But before, yes. And that's why it's so important to go through this process of becoming a world champion. Take your time, and if you adopt the right process, you will learn how to manage your nervousness, you'll learn how to manage your audiences, because you have spent enough time understanding the turns and corners, the nooks and crannies of public speaking. And by the time you become a world champion, you should be able to comfortably handle any situation on stage.
But go through the process, you mean go through all the different heats and go
Exactly.
through the
A lot of
stages.
people focus on winning the world championship in the first year or second year. What they don't realize is it could be done, but it won't make you a world champion speaker. Because you haven't gone through everything that a world champion speaker should go through. It's like playing a video game with cheats on.
Yeah, we learned it. Yeah. So but go through the process and follow through. That's where you're actually building your confidence, building the skills, and then you can hopefully cope with anything that these events will throw at you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. So from what you've learned over all the years, what would be your top few tips you could share to help people with their public speaking skills?
My first tip is public speaking is an outlet. I always say this. There is nothing called you can be a good public speaker by public speaking. And it sounds like oxymoron. Speaking is always an outlet. In order to become a good public speaker, you got to have a story to tell. You got to have experiences. You got to have gone through the nooks and crannies of life. So first of all, you got to figure out what is my purpose in life. What is my big goal? What is my story really? And while you go on that story, you can tell that story through public speaking. So the first thing is find your passion, find your story. Now a lot of people come and tell me my passion is public speaking. If your passion is public speaking, what are you going to talk about? Now Richard Branson is one of the world's most highly paid speakers. But his passion is entrepreneurship.
Yes, and that's what he talks about.
And he gets paid to speak about entrepreneurship. He doesn't go and say, my passion is public speaking. No one will pay you that much of money because you have a passion for public speaking. When Steve Jobs speaks about technology, his passion is technology. Now he uses public speaking to communicate that message. My passion in life is people development. That's what I've studied. That's why I have a company back home that does consulting in human resource development. That's my passion. And that's what I want to talk about. So it's important to find your niche, find your passion, and then use public speaking as an outlet to speak. So that's my first step.
Right.
Second step is learn the science behind public speaking. A lot of people don't study the art and science behind speaking. Speaking is about interpersonal psychology. Speaking is about communication psychology. Speaking is about branding. Speaking is about storytelling. Speaking is about so many other things. So it's very important for you to go into those areas, do your own research, and figure out how does the human brain work? How does the human brain code and encode information? How do people remember and recall things? Now, these are things that you got to do a deep study on, research, and find your own body of knowledge that will help you create great content. Number 3, something that I didn't understand back in the day, but I'm understanding now, is that to speak about some topics, you need to have experience. And sometimes you need to have a little gray hair as well. So a lot of young speakers who talk about profoundly life-changing topics initially may not be received well, because when you get on stage, you're young. What do you know about life?
Sure.
So it's very important to pick a topic that you have credibility to talk about. And it's always, a lot of budding speakers make this mistake, where they try to talk about leadership, where they try to talk about life coaching, and they're like 26. And it's not going to get you far. Pick a topic that you have credibility to talk about. Talk about innovation, when you're young. Talk about living an active life. Talk about sharing. Talk about a sharing economy. Whatever, something that you can talk about that adds credibility to yourself. And as you mature in your speaking career, you tackle different topics. That's a very important one.
So change the topic and develop the topics as you go through your career, rather than just sticking the same one. Which would make sense as we get older. We obviously got different experiences, and credibility would grow. So they're your top tips on helping us all to become speakers as we go through. So what next for Dananjaya?
That's a very interesting question. A lot of people ask me that after winning the World Championship, what's next? Actually, for me, winning this World Championship, I like to call it I adopted a muddling through approach. And I think the best things in life, you just muddle through it. And it's easy to say I have a plan, this is what I want to do, blah blah, but it's not true. Right now I'm figuring things out myself. I'm muddling through it. But whatever I do it world class. I might be speaking at a school tomorrow. I might be speaking at a business conference. I might be speaking to my friends. I might be doing a toast at a family function. Whatever it is, I just do it to like a world-class level. And I know as long as I do the little things every day to a world championship level, the future will take care of itself.
And would you say that you're still growing, you're still learning?
Absolutely.
All the time?
One of my teachers always said that the day you stop learning is the day you die. So for me, I always like to think of myself as someone who hasn't figured everything out yet. And there's a lot more to figure out. Not only in public speaking, but also in personal growth, also in confidence, also in just evolving and constantly reinventing yourself every day to align your thinking and align your energy and your frequency to an international audience. It's a very difficult thing to do, to relate to different cultures, different religions, different countries. And it takes reinvention on a daily basis to have the right personality, so that someone from Sweden to someone from Australia to someone from the Middle East to someone from Iceland could listen to you and say, I relate to this guy. So it's about reinventing yourself every day, and to reinvent yourself every day, you gotta keep on learning.
And I suppose that then ties back to what we said earlier about also then when you're going to these international countries, getting to know your audience, learning yourself, learning what they're going to expect from you,
Absolutely.
and adjusting accordingly.
Absolutely. More than doing your research on your audience, it's your ability to connect with the audience. That's very important. So what I normally like to do is I just go about 2-3 days in advance, and I just spend time with people. Just understanding their vibe, understanding their approach to life, what's important for them, how do they think, and just feeling the pulse of that community. Because, whenever I go to a country, people ask me, okay, how was London? How was Sweden?
Yeah.
How was Malaysia? And I tell them within a couple of days, within 4 or 5 days, you can't understand a country. So as a speaker, you interpret the country through the people you meet. So for me, what I always love to do is just spend time with people so that I can understand that culture better. And then when I understand the culture better, I can speak better to them.
And then you create that connection with the audience.
Absolutely, yes.
Dananjaya, it's been a wonderful talking to you today.
Thank you
so
very
much for
much,
sharing
Andy.
your time while you were here in London.
Pleasure was all mine, Andy, and thank you very much.